Welcome to Miss Scarlett. Subscribe and don't miss out on Patreon. Have fun! Beneath a veil of darkness, a hidden luminescence lured like a clandestine invitation. In a dimly lit room, the mystical glow emanated from a garment, its presence captivating. In front of this mysterious spectacle stood a person, poised at the intersection of their dual reality. For nearly 3 decades, Luis Moreno had meticulously constructed a life of duality. The sunlit hours saw him as an esteemed art curator, meticulously adorned in unassuming attire, ensuring he left no memorable trace. However, upon returning to his sanctuary, the night breathed life into Camille, a persona liberated from the day's constraints. A formal invitation, its golden engravings glistening, beckoned from the dresser. Having honed his alternate identity through years of secluded mastery, from the graceful art of heel walking to the intricacies of cosmetic artistry learnt from online guides, Luis discerned an unmissable prospect. Where everyone is hidden, yet revealed, the historic Crawford Mansion would host the city's elite in 3 days. Luis had attended such events before, always blending into the background, observing art rather than becoming it. But this time could be different. This time, Camille could step out of the shadows. His heart raced at the thought, equal parts terror and exhilaration flooding his system. He touched the velvet dress, a purchase made months ago that he'd never dared to wear beyond his apartment walls. "It's perfect for the gala," he murmured, admiring how the midnight blue fabric caught the light. The modest slit would allow movement while maintaining elegance, and the silver embroidery was subtle enough to be sophisticated without drawing undue attention. Decision made, Luis spent the next 3 days in meticulous preparation. He arranged an emergency personal day from work, citing family matters. The truth was far more personal. This would be Camille's debut, and everything needed to be perfect. The morning of the gala arrived with golden autumn sunlight streaming through half-drawn blinds. Luis awoke early, stomach fluttering with nervous anticipation. He laid out everything methodically: the dress, silver heels that had cost a month's lunch budget, the jewelry he'd collected piece by piece over years, and the finishing touch: a handcrafted mask adorned with crystals and feathers that matched the gown perfectly. Hours before the event, Luis began his transformation. A hot shower, a careful shave, moisturizer applied in gentle circles. Each step was a ritual he'd performed countless times, but today carried the weight of something momentous. He styled his blonde hair, which he'd been growing longer with this secret hope in mind. Though not yet reaching his shoulders, it had enough length to frame his face softly when styled properly. With practiced hands, he applied foundation, concealer, contour, building Camille's face with artistic precision. The eyeliner went on smoothly, enhancing eyes that looked different somehow, more alive, more present. Mascara lengthened already long lashes. A touch of rosy blush warmed cheeks that had grown flushed with excitement. When Luis finally slipped into the midnight blue dress, something shifted. The weight of the fabric, the way it embraced curves both natural and carefully enhanced, felt right in a way nothing else ever had. He studied himself in the full-length mirror, hardly recognizing the reflection. Gone was Luis with his careful invisibility. In his place stood Camille, elegant, poised, and undeniably present. Her blonde hair caught the light, and the dress complemented her figure perfectly. The silver mask was the final piece. As Camille, secured it in place, the transformation was complete. Her fingers lingered on the feathers, feeling how they whispered against her skin when she moved. "Hello," she said softly to her reflection, and her voice carried a confidence that surprised her. Getting to the Crawford mansion proved nerve-wracking, but manageable. The rideshare driver glanced in the rearview mirror several times, but made no comment beyond, "Special night out?" "A masquerade fundraiser," Camille replied, pleased at how steady her voice remained.
"Well, you look amazing,"
the driver said with casual sincerity.
"Have a great time."
Those simple words of affirmation carried Camille up the steps of the magnificent historic mansion. Gas lamps illuminated the stone facade, creating pools of golden light that guided guests toward the entrance. String quartet music drifted through open doors, mingling with laughter and the soft murmur of conversation. At the doorway, Camille hesitated. Beyond this threshold, there was no going back. She took a deep breath, feeling the slight resistance of the dress's bodice, and stepped forward. Inside, the mansion opened into a grand foyer with a soaring ceiling and crystal chandelier that scattered light like diamonds. Guests in formal attire and elaborate masks moved through the space, creating a dreamscape of color and movement. Servers carried trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres, navigating the crowd with practiced ease. Camille accepted a flute of champagne, grateful for something to hold. The cool glass anchored her as she took in the magnificent surroundings. "That dress is absolutely stunning," the voice came from behind, causing Camille to turn carefully, mindful of her heels. A woman in a crimson gown and gold mask smiled warmly. "The embroidery is exquisite," the woman continued. "You look regal in that color." "Thank you," Camille replied, warmth spreading through her chest at the word regal. "Your gown is beautiful as well." The woman introduced herself as Eleanor, a board member for the museum. Camille had met her several times as Louise, but now, with the mask and transformation, Eleanor showed no sign of recognition. "Are you connected with the arts community?" Eleanor asked. "Yes," Camille answered truthfully. "I work with historical pieces primarily." "How fascinating! You must tell me more." For 20 minutes, they discussed various exhibitions and collections, Camille carefully avoiding specifics that might reveal her identity while drawing on her professional knowledge. The conversation flowed naturally, without the awkwardness Louise often felt at such functions. As Eleanor excused herself to greet other guests, Camille realized something profound. She was having fun. Not the nervous, hyper-aware kind of engagement Louise forced himself through at work events, but genuine enjoyment. The evening progressed like a dream sequence. Camille danced with a distinguished gentleman who complimented her grace. She discussed Renaissance art with a professor who assumed she was a colleague from another university. She bid on silent auction items, her handwriting flowing more elegantly than Louise's ever did. Throughout it all, the midnight blue dress moved with her like a second skin. The velvet caught the light differently with each movement, sometimes appearing almost black, other times revealing deep sapphire depths. Several people commented on how perfectly it suited her, how the color brought out something in her eyes that even the mask couldn't hide. For the first time, Camille understood what it meant to truly inhabit a space. Louise had always felt like an observer, carefully navigating social interactions from behind invisible barriers. Camille, by contrast, was present. She felt the music, tasted the champagne, engaged in conversations without the constant internal monologue of self-doubt. As the night progressed, she found herself on the mansion's grand balcony, taking a moment of quiet reflection. The gardens below were illuminated with soft lights that traced pathways between ancient trees and sculpted hedges. "It's quite a view, isn't it?" A man in a classic black tuxedo and simple black mask joined her, respecting her space while offering conversation. "It's breathtaking," Camille agreed. "The perfect backdrop for such an evening." "I've been watching you tonight," he said, then quickly added, "Not in a strange way, I promise. You just move through the room with such confidence. It's captivating." Camille laughed softly. "That might be the greatest fiction of all at a masquerade. I assure you, beneath this mask is a bundle of nerves." "Then you hide it well," he said. "I'm Richard, by the way. I oversee the Foundation's restoration projects." "Camille," she replied, the name passing her lips without hesitation. It felt right, natural, her name, not a costume. They talked about the mansion's history, about art preservation, about the stars visible beyond the city's glow. Richard was knowledgeable and passionate about his work, and Camille found herself genuinely engaged in the conversation. When they eventually returned to the main ballroom, Richard asked,
"Would you care to dance?"
The quartet was playing something slow and elegant. Couples moved across the floor in practiced patterns, the women's gowns creating a kaleidoscope of color beneath the chandeliers. "I'd love to," Camille said, surprising herself with her eagerness. Richard led her onto the dance floor with a gentle hand at the small of her back. When she placed her hand in his, she felt a momentary panic. Would he notice something masculine about her hands? But he simply smiled and guided her into the dance. One dance became 2, then 3. Richard was an excellent partner, leading without dominating, creating space for Camille to shine. The midnight blue dress swirled around her legs, the modest slit, allowing freedom of movement while maintaining the gown's elegant line.
"You dance beautifully,"
Richard commented during a turn. "Thank you," Camille replied, feeling the compliment settle around her like a warm shawl. "The dress helps."
"There's something magical about moving in such a beautiful piece." "It's not the dress,"
Richard said with gentle certainty,
"though it is extraordinary."
As midnight approached, the gala director announced that it was time for the evening's highlight, the costume awards. Guests gathered around the grand staircase as judges prepared to announce winners in various categories. Best historical representation went to a couple dressed as Georgian aristocracy. Most creative use of materials was awarded to a woman whose dress was constructed entirely of upcycled materials, transformed into something beautiful and unexpected. "And finally," the announcer said, "our Best Dressed Award, which recognizes the attendee whose ensemble most perfectly captures the spirit of elegance and artistry that defines the Bellamy Foundation's mission." Camille applauded politely, expecting one of the more elaborately dressed guests to claim the honor. "The award goes to the lady in midnight blue velvet." A spotlight swept the crowd, finding Camille where she stood near the back. Faces turned toward her, smiling in approval. Richard nudged her gently. "That's you," he whispered. "Go on." In a daze, Camille made her way through the parting crowd. Each step in her silver heels felt deliberate, conscious. This wasn't happening to Louise pretending to be someone else. This was happening to her, to Camille. Ascending the stairs, she accepted the small crystal trophy and certificate for a private tour of the Foundation's restoration studios, a coveted opportunity in the art world.
"Would you like to say a few words?"
the announcer asked. Camille looked out at the sea of masks and expectant faces. In that moment, with the weight of the midnight blue dress against her skin and the chandelier light catching the silver embroidery, she found a voice she didn't know she possessed. "Thank you for this honor," she said, her voice clear and steady. "They say clothes make the person, but tonight I've discovered it's more accurate to say clothes allow the person to emerge. This dress," she smoothed a hand over the velvet, "made me feel worthy of being seen. Thank you for seeing me." Applause followed her back down the stairs. People reached out to touch her arm, to offer congratulations. Richard waited at the bottom, his eyes warm behind his mask.
"That was lovely,"
he said, "and true." As the evening began to wind down, Camille found herself reluctant to leave. Each moment, as herself, felt precious, worth holding on to.
"The Foundation hosts smaller events throughout the year,"
Richard mentioned as they stood near the coat check.
"Lectures, private viewings, restoration workshops.
Would you be interested in attending some of those? I could put your name on the guest list." Camille hesitated. "I'm not sure
I understand if you're busy,"
Richard said quickly.
"But you clearly have a passion for art and history. I think you'd enjoy them."
Looking into his kind eyes, Camille made a decision. "I would love that, actually. Thank you." They exchanged contact information, Camille giving him an email address she'd created years ago but rarely used. As they parted, Richard kissed her hand in a gesture that might have seemed affected from anyone else, but felt genuine from him.
"Until next time, Camille."
The journey home felt surreal. Streets that had seemed threatening on the way to the gala now appeared simply quiet. The rideshare driver was different, but again offered nothing more than a casual compliment and wish for a good night. Back in her apartment, Camille stood before the mirror, still fully dressed, the mask now removed. The person who gazed back was not Louise playing dress-up. It was her, Camille, with flushed cheeks and bright eyes, existing fully in the world for the first time. She touched the midnight blue velvet of her dress, remembering how it had felt to dance, to be admired, to be seen as her authentic self. The Best Dressed award sat on her dresser, catching the light, but the true prize was the realization that had come with it. For years, Louis had told himself that Camille was a fantasy, a secret indulgence to be enjoyed only in private. But tonight had proven otherwise. Tonight had shown that Camille was more real, more present, more alive than Louise had ever been. With reverent care, she removed the dress, hanging it where she could see it, rather than hiding it away. She cleansed her face, watching as the makeup disappeared, but feeling as though something essential remained. That night, she slept more peacefully than she had in years, dreams filled with chandelier light and midnight blue velvet. Morning arrived with reality's harsh clarity. Work beckoned, Louise's work, with its navy suits and subdued existence. Camille stared at the masculine clothes laid out on the bed, feeling a disconnect she could no longer ignore. "No," she whispered, "not anymore." She called in sick, something she rarely did, then spent the day researching. She found support groups, therapists specializing in gender identity, resources she'd been afraid to explore before. She made appointments, sent emails, took the first steps toward bringing Camille into the daylight. The following weeks unfolded in a blur of activity and emotion. Camille began therapy with a compassionate specialist who helped her navigate the complex feelings she'd suppressed for so long. She connected with others who understood her experience, who offered guidance and solidarity. 3 weeks after the gala, she received an email from the Bellamy Foundation about an exclusive viewing of newly restored paintings. At the bottom was a personal note from Richard, hoping she'd attend. She did, wearing a forest green dress that was elegant but less formal than her gala attire. Her blonde hair was styled simply but femininely, and her makeup was subtle, appropriate for an afternoon cultural event. When Richard saw her, his face lit up with genuine pleasure.
Camille, I'm so glad you could make it.
They toured the exhibition together, Camille drawing on her professional knowledge while being careful not to reveal too much about her position at the museum. Richard introduced her to colleagues and artists, proudly including her in conversations.
You know so much about these techniques,
he commented as they discussed a particularly challenging restoration. Are you in the field professionally? Camille took a breath. I work in art curation, she said truthfully. Though I'm in a period of transition right now. It wasn't a lie, merely a different kind of truth. Well, the foundation is always looking for consultants with your knowledge, Richard said. If you're ever interested. The idea planted itself in her mind. A new career path, one where she could start fresh as Camille. It seemed impossible, yet after the night of the gala, impossible had lost some of its power. Over the following months, Camille emerged more fully into the world. She attended more foundation events, each time growing more comfortable in her identity. She built friendships within the communities she'd discovered, finding strength in shared experiences. At work, Luis gave notice, citing a career change. It was difficult, leaving a position he'd worked hard to achieve, but necessary for the journey ahead. His colleagues were surprised, but supportive, unaware of the true nature of his new direction. 6 months after the masquerade, Camille sat across from Richard at a small restaurant near the Arts District. Their friendship had evolved naturally, built on shared interests and genuine connection. Richard knew her now, not her full history, not yet, but her authentic self. I've been offered a consulting position with the Westridge Gallery, she told him over dinner. They're expanding their historical collection and need expertise on authentication and preservation.
Camille, that's wonderful.
Richard raised his glass in toast.
They're lucky to have you.
She took a sip of wine, the dark liquid reminding her of the midnight blue dress that had started everything. I wouldn't have had the confidence to apply without these past months, without the foundation events, without... She paused. Without you believing in me. Richard's expression softened.
I've only reflected back what was already there.
Later that evening, walking along the river path illuminated by antique-style lampposts, Richard took her hand. The gesture was simple but meaningful. Acceptance, connection, possibility.
The spring gala is coming up,
he mentioned. No masks this time, just a regular formal event. Camille felt a momentary flutter of anxiety. The mask had provided a certain security at that first event, a barrier between worlds. Without it, I'd love to attend, she said, making the decision before fear could take root.
Perhaps in emerald this time, instead of midnight blue.
Richard smiled.
You'll outshine everyone, just like last time.
1 year after the masquerade gala where Camille had first stepped into the world, she stood before a different mirror in a different apartment. The reflection that gazed back showed the journey of the past 12 months. More refined makeup techniques, more feminine styling of her blonde hair, which now reached past her shoulders, a body gradually changing through hormone therapy she'd begun 6 months earlier. On the bed lay an emerald green gown, elegant and quietly confident, like its wearer. Beside it, the midnight blue dress that had started everything, brought out for the occasion as a reminder of how far she'd come. Her phone chimed with a text from Richard. Car will be there in 30 minutes. Can't wait to see you. Their relationship had developed slowly, built on friendship first. When Camille had finally shared her full truth with him 3 months ago, his response had been simple. Thank you for trusting me with your journey. It doesn't change how I feel about the woman I've come to know. Tonight's foundation gala would be different from the first. No mask to hide behind. Colleagues from her museum days who might recognize her. A date who knew her completely. Yet Camille felt ready in a way Louise never could have imagined. She slipped into the emerald gown, the smooth fabric cool against her skin. The dress fit perfectly, designed for her body as it was now, embracing her authentic form. She added simple jewelry, silver to complement the gown's deep color, and stepped into heels that no longer felt like a costume, but simply her shoes. A final look in the mirror confirmed what she already knew. The person reflected back was not playing a part or hiding behind a mask. This was Camille, finally and completely herself. The midnight blue dress lay on the bed, its role fulfilled. It had shown her who she truly was, had given her the courage to step into a life that once seemed impossible. Now, it was simply a beautiful garment with a beautiful memory, no longer needed as a gateway between worlds. The doorbell rang precisely on time. Camille gathered her evening bag, took one last glance at her reflection, and went to answer it. Richard stood in the hallway, handsome in his tuxedo, eyes warming at the sight of her. "You look absolutely stunning," he said, taking her hand. "Thank you," Camille replied, no longer surprised by compliments or questioning whether she deserved them. "Shall we?" As they drove toward the historic venue, Camille thought about the journey that had begun with an invitation and a midnight blue dress. From frightened first steps to this moment of confident stride, from hiding to being fully seen. The car pulled up to the grand entrance where a year ago Camille had hesitated before stepping into a new life. Tonight, she emerged from the vehicle without pause, her emerald gown catching the light from the mansion's windows. Richard offered his arm, and together they ascended the steps. At the top, Camille turned to look back at the path that had brought her here, feeling the weight of all that had changed and all that remained to discover. The doors opened, welcoming her into a future bright with possibility, no masks required. Camille stepped forward, finally and completely at home in her own skin, moving through the world as her authentic self, regal, present, and free.
Thanks for watching, my girlies! Be sure to check out Patreon for more!